"How lovely to see my beautiful wife's radiant smile," Derek said, raising his glass in a toast. I froze, my grin melting faster than ice on a hot summer day. Wife? Radiant? I hadn't smiled in months. I scanned the formally set dining table that I certainly hadn't helped prepare. His family surrounded us, beaming. My own kinspersons were notably absent. Not that it mattered. After all, this dinner was to celebrate Derek's latest achievement, a fancy promotion or award or something. I had stopped listening to the specifics a while ago. Derek rambled on, the perfect host entertaining his perfect guests. I stared at my plate, pushing the expertly cooked food around with my fork, my appetite gone. He gestured expansively, praising his own culinary skills. Culinary skills I never knew he had. In our year of marriage, I had never once seen that man step foot in a kitchen. I dropped my fork, the clatter muted by the embroidered tablecloth. "When exactly did you learn to cook a gourmet meal?" I asked pointedly. "Considering all your recent business trips, I wasn't aware you had time to take cooking classes." An uncomfortable silence blanketed the table. I ignored it, focusing on Derek's reaction. Shock, then annoyance flashed across his face. He quickly schooled his features behind his trademark plastic smile. "Leanna, what a sense of humor you have." His forced laugh sounded shrill and panicked to my ears. "Good. You know my presentations run late, so I often have working dinners with clients." I raised a single eyebrow. "And these clients also taught you to expertly fillet a sea bass?" His father leapt to Derek's defense. "Now, Leanna," Calvin admonished, "you should be grateful for Derek's tireless work ethic. It's provided you with this lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury vehicles, extravagant vacations." I bristled, biting back the retort poised on my tongue. My so-called lifestyle was nothing more than a gilded cage paid for with Derek's blood money, or at least the money I had assumed was his. Now doubts needled my mind. Forcing a tight smile, I turned to Derek's mother and deftly changed the subject. As she prattled on about her garden club, my thoughts roiled. When had Derek become so skilled in deception? More importantly, what else had he lied about? I needed answers. After the endless evening finally ended, I cornered Derek in our opulent living room. Hands on hips, I confronted his dishonesty. "I want the truth," I demanded. "No more lies or omissions." Derek's facade fully shattered, his handsome face twisting spitefully. "You humiliated me tonight with your baseless accusations," he snarled. I fought to maintain my composure. "Then prove me wrong," I challenged. His lips flattened into a hard, angry line. Then he turned abruptly and stalked out without another word. I watched him go, my heart cracking. In his icy silence I found all the proof I needed. My picture-perfect marriage now lay exposed as a complete sham. I had twisted myself to fit the role of perfect wife, quitting my job, relinquishing my own dreams and desires in favor of supporting Derek's ambitions. All because I believed our love to be real. That belief had rooted me when loneliness crept in, when doubt whispered insidiously that something wasn't right. No more. I refused to continue living this lie of a marriage. If Derek wouldn't give me the truth willingly, then I would just have to discover it for myself. The silence in our cavernous apartment pressed down on me, cold and heavy like a leaden shroud. I wandered listlessly between the ornate yet impersonal rooms, absently trailing one hand along the smooth marble countertops and luxury furnishings. What was once filled with promise and possibility now echoed with loss and regret in the all-consuming emptiness. I paused before the window overlooking the glittering city lights, a view that once inspired awe but now only emphasized my isolation 30 stories up in this tower of steel and glass, like a modern-day Rapunzel trapped in her own illusion of happiness. When had that illusion shattered completely? When had the emotional chasm between Derek and I become so vast? The changes had crept slowly, distance growing insidiously like black mold behind walls, invisible yet toxic. His long hours at the office stretched into weekends away at conferences, which blurred into overseas business trips. The trips came frequently now, often at a moment's notice. "Emergency client meetings," Derek would claim in his smooth voice after I'd confront him about a last-minute canceled dinner or trip. His words slipped between us as insubstantial as smoke, their plausibility eroding a little more each time. Something sinister lurked behind his well-crafted excuses. I sensed it in my marrow. Derek hid a dark truth, one he desperately did not want discovered. Well, the jig was up. After that disastrous dinner, I refused to swallow his lies any longer. My phone vibrated in my pocket, jolting me from my spiraling thoughts. Expecting Derek's name, a puzzled frown pulled my lips down when I saw the caller ID. My mother was the one person more enamored of Derek than I once was, ruthlessly pushing me toward marriage. For her to call was highly unusual. I slid my thumb across the screen, lifting the phone to my ear. "Leanna, thank God you answered." Her shrill voice was devoid of any warmth or affection. Before I could reply, she ranted on. "How could you embarrass Derek like that in front of his family? And then make a dramatic scene by leaving early? Have you lost all sense of propriety?" I blinked hard against the sting of tears. Of course she would take Derek's side, even over her own daughters. I drew in a long breath. Perhaps if either of you bothered to include me in family events, I might know how to behave properly. Bitterness roughened my words. Or was I supposed to intuit the expectations telepathically? A contemptuous sniff rattled through the line. There are no expectations for absent wives too self-absorbed in their own little worlds to support their hard-working husbands. She paused, then continued in a vicious tone meant to demean. Then again, Derek deserved better. A woman not so lacking in beauty or talent. Her criticism pierced my fragile confidence with the precision of an arrow, threatening emotional hemorrhaging. Gasping raggedly, I stabbed at the red circle on screen, ending the call before she could further shred my self-worth. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. How dare she attack me when I was the injured party? Derek's deceit apparently spread beyond ruining my reputation with his family. He had turned my own mother against me. Red-hot fury kindled in my gut, the flames fueled by pain and betrayal. If Derek insisted upon war, then I would not hesitate to scorch the earth to root him out. I swiped angrily at my eyes. No more tears, no more weakness. I needed to know exactly what Derek plotted in the dark shadows. Time to hunt down an informant capable of illuminating his lies. I scrutinized the business card clutched in my sweaty palm, memorizing the embossed lettering. George McNamara, private investigator. My last resort gleamed like a beacon of hope in the murky confusion my life had become. With courage fueled by desperation, I pushed through the nondescript door into McNamara's office. The space matched my expectations. Dimly lit, dusty Venetian blinds half drawn, filing cabinet in the corner. Behind a battle-scarred desk sat a bear of a man, his keen azure eyes belying his otherwise rumpled appearance. McNamara studied me, bushy salt-and-pepper eyebrows raised. "Mrs. Dalton, I presume?" His gravelly voice reminded me of worn truck tires rolling over gravel. I nodded, perching on the edge of the visitor's chair. My words tumbled out in a rush as I detailed my suspicions, ending with a plea. "I know he's hiding something, but I can't prove it. Please, you have to help me find the truth." The private eye leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin as he listened intently, his piercing gaze cataloging everything from my strained tone to my disheveled appearance. I squirmed under his scrutiny, painfully aware of how I must look with lank hair, yesterday's smudged makeup, and the same yoga pants and baggy sweater I'd worn for 3 days now. Hardly the image of a successful businessman's wife. Finally, McNamara leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. "I'll take the case, but brace yourself. The truth isn't always pretty." Relief loosened the tight coils of anxiety in my chest. I just need to know one way or another. The not knowing is eating me alive. I meant that literally, as I couldn't remember the last time I managed to choke down more than a few bites of food or a few fitful hours of nightmare-plagued sleep. This had to end. McNamara promised daily updates as he launched immediately into his investigation. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in ages, as if fresh air finally circulated in my oppressed lungs. The sensation lasted mere hours, popped like an iridescent soap bubble by my trilling cell phone. Caller ID announced the impending pinprick. Calvin Dalton. Wonderful. "Leanna Ellen Dalton," my father-in-law thundered without preamble. "How dare you smear Derek's good name with your family by spreading such atrocious lies? He is the most devoted, hard-working husband a woman could dream of having. That you fail to adequately support him is your deficiency, not his." Calvin ranted on as I sat stunned, his accusations striking me like physical blows. At last, the initial shock wore off, replaced by smoldering anger and a deep sense of betrayal. Derek continued spinning his web of lies, further undermining me with my own family. This time he had gone too far. I would not let him impugn my character, so my reputation lay in tatters while he played the martyr. "That is enough," I shouted into the phone, startling Calvin to silence. "The only one spreading lies is your precious son. Do not call me again with your misguided vitriol, because I will not listen to another word against my good name." I violently stabbed at the red icon on my phone screen, ending the call with a defiant jab. Blood roared in my ears and my breath came in ragged pants, fury simmering my blood. Derek insisted on playing dirty by ruining my family relationships? Fine. Then it was past time I fight back on his level. No more cowering in corners for me. I strode up the walkway lined with precisely trimmed box hedges to the sprawling Dalton family mansion, chin lifted with moxie mostly feigned. Time to face the lion's den. When Calvin phoned yesterday, insisting my presence was mandatory at some family milestone for Derek's sister Diana, I knew it for the ambush it was. Another opportunity for the Daltons to barrage me with condemnation for daring to sully their golden child's good reputation. Well, I refused to be the only target remaining in this vicious battle. Tonight, their famed perfect family dynamic would finally crack and splinter under the weight of truth too long suppressed. I just prayed my backbone would hold steady under their inevitable vitriol. Squaring my shoulders as if preparing for battle, I pressed the ornate doorbell. Calvin himself flung open the immense oak door, his usual genial smile replaced by a patronizing smirk. "Leanna, so glad you could join us tonight." The sarcasm dripped from each word like venom. "Right this way." He ushered me not into the house's soaring foyer but along the covered porch toward the rear veranda. Curious family members peered through curtained windows as we passed. My cheeks flamed, but I refused to show any weakness, spine rigid, and gaze focused straight ahead. We stepped through wide French doors onto the expansive flagstone patio swarmed with Dalton relatives under twinkle lights, like fireflies winking merrily in counterpoint to the building tension crackling through the space. Calvin guided me to the outdoor living area beside a massive stone fireplace where Derek perched on a leather sofa, every inch the conquering hero. "Leanna decided to grace us with her presence after all," Calvin proclaimed loudly with hand gestures as if presenting a zoo animal. "Shall we allow her a chance to defend her reprehensible behavior?" A tight smile stretched my lips, though fury blazed in my eyes. So that was their play then. Fine by me. I cleared my throat delicately, then launched into my counterattack. "Actually, Calvin, I believe it is your son who owes everyone here an explanation." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on recklessly. "The only behavior I'm guilty of is being foolish enough to trust a man apparently devoid of integrity." Murmurs rose as all eyes pivoted to Derek, still lounging arrogantly on the couch, one ankle propped casually atop the opposite knee. Though tension bracketed his mouth, he appeared nonplussed. "And pray tell, what lapse in integrity have I displayed?" Derek snapped caustically. "Working hard to support my wife so she may spend her days lunching and shopping to her heart's content?" Anger flared. Did he truly fail to comprehend the depth of his betrayal? I trembled with suppressed rage. "Do not attempt to twist facts with your distorted view of reality." My voice rang clearly in the sudden silence. "You know precisely what I reference. The days and nights you claimed were filled with important meetings while you deliberately concealed your true activities." I paused, pinning him with an unrelenting stare. "Who exactly have you been frequenting that condo on Park Avenue with Derek, and why have you purposefully hidden the truth from me?" The assembled family members inhaled their shock in unison. Eyes widened, shifted back to Derek. After an extended tense moment, my mother-in-law Millie broke the ringing quiet. "Well, how about a nice family picture?" Her falsely bright tone belied the panic in her eyes as the family illusion of perfection rapidly unraveled at the seams. I slid behind the wheel of my slate-gray Acura, pulse thrumming with exhilaration. Confronting Derek and his family's blindness to his faults filled me with crackling energy despite the sting of burns from their acidic contempt. However, my bravado shriveled when faced with the monumental task still ahead, proving Derek's infidelity. I twisted the key in the ignition, Time to do some detective work of my own. Pulling from the driveway, I headed toward Derek's sleek downtown office building, making good time in the sparse Sunday evening traffic. I eased into a spot in the shadowed parking garage, killing the lights but leaving the engine idling. Now to see if my wayward husband planned on logging weekend overtime tonight as well. I didn't have long to wait before a cherry-red Jaguar roared up to the executive parking section in the corner. I straightened in my seat, straining to confirm the driver's identity in the intermittent fluorescent lighting. Please let instincts be correct just this once. Then the interior flared to life as he opened the door and leaned in to gather his briefcase. Jackpot! My pulse leapt as Derek's handsome face was briefly illuminated. I watched him breeze inside, without glancing around like a man with a clear purpose. Where could he possibly be going this late on a Sunday? The offices stood dark and deserted on weekends, except perhaps for a clandestine rendezvous with that mystery woman I guessed awaited somewhere within. Drumming my fingers impatiently on the steering wheel, I weighed options: confront Derek directly and risk him slipping away, or trail him covertly to uncover the sordid truth. Given his talent for manipulation, I decided surveillance was my smartest, if not exactly noblest, choice. If I approached without concrete proof, he would undoubtedly twist scenarios and cast doubts until ending up the aggrieved innocent. Well, not this time, buddy. I cranked my engine and crept from the garage, catching sight of Derek's Jag pulling smoothly into traffic. Keeping a few vehicles between us, I shadowed him to an upscale condo tower 10 minutes away. Of course, the infamous Park Avenue property I had confronted him about just yesterday. At least now I knew for certain his denial was yet another bald-faced lie woven with practiced ease. No innocent reason existed for Derek to frequent an expensive condo clearly intended for clandestine affairs. I watched him swagger inside without a backwards glance. The private investigator I hired earlier this week likely knew all the specifics: who owned the property, how often Derek visited, and most importantly, who he met there. I just had to be patient and maintain surveillance until I received the PI's condemning report. Still, curiosity needled me. Who was worth risking his marriage and reputation over? Did Derek sneak off for secret romantic trysts with his assistant, a stranger from a seedy website for married affairs? Bile burned the back of my throat. Whoever she was, one thing seemed certain: this likely wasn't her first tango with a married man. Clearly an experienced predator. For now, I had seen enough. Starting my car, I pointed it back toward the privacy of my own apartment where I could call McNamara. Surely, he already possessed evidence revealing the depth of Derek's tangled web of lies and betrayal. I only hoped revealing that treachery to his beloved family would finally splinter Derek's picture-perfect illusions into jagged shards too sharp to repair. My soon-to-be ex-husband was overdue for a brutal wake-up call. I strode purposely into the lavishly decorated ballroom, chin lifted with confidence I didn't entirely feel. Time for the main event, publicly exposing Derek's duplicity to his family's elite social circle. I paused in the double doorway, scanning the room until I spotted my target holding court in the center of a sycophantic knot of businessmen. Gotcha. Adjusting my new designer cocktail dress, I glided through the room straight toward Derek, smiling toothily. The wolf entering the den of lions. Disengaging from his group with a puzzled frown, Derek moved to intercept me. "Leanna, what are you doing here?" I blinked innocently, attending my husband's important event just as a supportive spouse should. Wariness crept into his expression as his mouth tightened. Clearly he suspected brewing trouble. Good instincts. We faced off silently in the middle of the ornate room, tension charging the atmosphere like gathering thunderclouds. I relished stretching this moment, making Derek squirm. "Is that why you're wearing a sexy new dress and your hair styled?" He made an effort to keep his tone neutral, but his darting eyes betrayed unease. "Of course. I'm playing the glamorous wife tonight since your little mistress couldn't attend." My smile turned razor sharp. Gotcha. Derek actually paled beneath his artfully stubbled beard. "Leanna, I don't know what nonsense you're spewing now, but clearly you're confused. Oh, let's dispense with the lies for once." My voice rang out clearly in the sudden hush radiating through the room as all eyes pivoted toward us, standing in the center of the ornate space. I welcomed the rapt audience for Derek's imminent humiliation. Pulling a plain manila envelope from my small clutch with a dramatic flourish, I withdrew an 8x10 photograph capturing Derek in a passionate embrace with a gorgeous brunette, locked in a deep kiss as they entered an apartment building. His extravagant condo. This looks like all the proof anyone needs of your flagrant infidelity. I held up the incriminating evidence with a flourish as horrified gasps echoed. Derek lunged unsuccessfully to grab the photo. Gotcha again. Derek visibly crumbled before my eyes, impressive facade eroding. Gone was the urbane businessman's schmoozing associates, leaving a pathetically crushed man in an overpriced suit. Calvin shoved through the stunned onlookers, bravado weakened by distress. Son, this can't possibly be true. Explain yourself. Behind him, Derek's mother Millie dissolved into tearful hysterics, supported by her best friend Lorraine. Derek just stood mute, shoulders slumped and eyes clouded with despair. In that moment, he resembled a lost little boy more than a captain of industry. I recognized divorce's costly price, stamped raw across his face, his family standing in tattered ruins alongside our destroyed marriage. "Get out!" Calvin thundered, face mottled purple with rage as he pointed a rigid finger toward the exit. "Don't expect sympathy or support from any of us after this ultimate betrayal." Derek cringed, nodding sadly before stumbling away on legs noticeably unsteady. The room unleashed a chaotic maelstrom of accusatory voices and racking sobs. I held myself tall amongst the debris, finally vindicated. My husband's spectacle of lies had collapsed like the House of Usher under the weight of truth. Now to see if its destruction freed me to rebuild my own life atop the rubble. I eased my sleek sedan against the curb half a block down from the imposing Dalton family manor, eyeing the flurry of activity outside the impressive home. The day after my nuclear detonation of Derek's established world order at the gala, and still the fallout continued. My lips quirked. Several days of relentless phone calls to the family matriarch finally resulted in this meeting with Millie. Time to find out whether the scales had fallen from her eyes yet regarding her fraudulent son's battered halo. My odds looked hopeful, judging by the catering vans and carpet cleaners steadily arriving, clearly preparing for my prodigal return to the family fold. I rummaged in my designer purse until fingers closed around cool metal. Extracting a heavy brass key, I rubbed my thumb across the ornate D embossed on the bow. The key to the kingdom, well, at least access to the Dalton family lair. A peace offering presented years ago by Millie herself when I first married her precious only son. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," she had exclaimed while pressing the weighty token into my palm. Then she pulled me into a warm, jasmine-scented hug that felt like coming home. I clung to that tender gesture now like a talisman, hoping enough maternal love lingered to bridge chasms torn wide by betrayal. After one last steadying breath, I slipped from the safety of my vehicle and clicked steadily up the paved walkway in my highest confidence-boosting heels. Time to face the lion's den. I pressed the brass key home, then eased the towering oak door open. "Millie?" I called tentatively. "It's Leanna." A slender blonde whirlwind exploded from a side parlor, fielding me in a ferocious embrace redolent in Chanel No. 5. "Leanna, my beautiful girl," Millie chirped brightly. "We have so much catching up to do." Over steaming mugs of Earl Grey poured from heirloom china, whole stories spilled out in a cathartic rush. Of Derek's chronic detachment from his wife, the insidious isolation as he deliberately estranged me from family, his pathological lies spinning fictions until no truth remained. I knew something lurked beneath the surface, but I never imagined betrayal this cruel. Millie's weary eyes swam with fresh tears even now. My own child capable of such calculated deception, and toward those he supposedly loved. I reached across the polished mahogany table to grasp her graceful hands in mine. Derek alone owns responsibility for trading real relationships for superficial gain. I gentled my voice, adding with soft fervency, "But you and I finding understanding today that finally feels like hope rising from the ashes." A watery yet true smile graced Millie's lips for the first time since I arrived. "Oh, Leanna, of course I still love you like a daughter. We women must stick together now to heal these wounds." Sudden resolve hardened her delicate jawline, starting by cutting off Derek and his harlots completely. I blinked in surprise. Does this mean? Millie nodded vehemently. You were right confronting Derek's cheating publicly at the gala. His betrayal can't be concealed and forgiven. I should know. She broke off suddenly, waving one manicured hand as if swatting the past aside. Regardless, there must be consequences for such deception. I probed cautiously. Like withdrawing financial support so he can't continue living the high life with his mistress? A ruthless glint sparked in Millie's eyes. Exactly. Let the flashy leech pay his own bills for a change instead of tapping our accounts. Without money to burn, his bedazzled bimbo won't stick around anyway. She shrugged delicately. Serves him right for upending our entire family with his lies. For the first time since confronting Derek, bright hope pierced my heart. His own mother finally grasped the scope of his cruelty and now aligned firmly by my side. Together we would ensure Derek never destroyed an innocent woman again. Justice would be done. I rolled over with a luxuriant stretch, sunbeams tickling my face filtered softly through gauzy curtains. A glance at the clock confirmed I had indulged in a delightfully decadent mid-morning lie-in, without any obligations dragging me from the cozy nest of down-stuffed comforters. I could definitely become accustomed to leisurely mornings like this. Swinging my legs out of bed, I padded across artfully weathered hardwood floors and thick Turkish rugs to fling wide the curtains framing glass doors overlooking downtown. Beautiful morning sunshine glinted off skyscraper windows outside my panoramic penthouse view. I sighed happily. This new condo was everything my old place had not been. Bright, airy, and filled with possibility, just like this next chapter of my life. A knock interrupted my contented musings. I tugged a satin robe over my camisole pajamas and hurried to greet my guest. Swinging the door wide, I welcomed the aromas of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries. Good morning, gorgeous. Millie bustled in, bearing breakfast. I thought we could celebrate over this lovely spread from that French patisserie you adore. Soon we relaxed together on the balcony, fueling girl talk with lattes and croissants while cawing seagulls wheeled over the skyline. I confessed the truth, I could barely acknowledge myself these past painful years. I knew in my core something was wrong almost from the beginning, I admitted quietly, eyes downcast. I felt Derek's emotional distance even during our honeymoon. Millie squeezed my hand supportively. Yet you persevered because you're resilient and caring by nature. Her tone turned fierce. But my son didn't deserve your beautiful spirit. He's proven completely unworthy. I brushed crumbs off my hands, appetite fading. If only I had trusted my instincts instead of making excuses. Darling, stop punishing yourself. Hindsight brings clarity about red flags, but the present grants opportunity. Millie took my hands firmly, compelling my gaze to hers, glowing with conviction. Now you're free to seek someone who truly cherishes you. I offered a tremulous smile, encouraged by her staunch validation. My phone chirped brightly. Glancing at the screen, my pulse quickened, seeing my lawyer's name. I answered immediately. Leanna Dalton speaking? Yes? Millie watched closely as I began grinning wildly. That's wonderful news. Thank you for all your dedicated hard work securing this outcome. I disconnected the call and victoriously pumped both fists overhead. My divorce is finalized at last. The judge approved my request given Derek's infidelity, and I drew out the dramatic moment. I received 75% of all marital assets. Millie cheered loudly, grabbing my hands as we danced an impromptu jig. Hallelujah! That philandering snake got his financial comeuppance, and you, my resourceful dear, are awarded means to make a fresh start on your own terms. I threw my arms around Millie, hugging her tightly with joyful abandon. Despite heartbreak and bitter struggles, I had reclaimed independence and self-respect by ultimately trusting my inner wisdom. Never again would any man devalue my worth or make me question my sanity. From now on, I shone as brightly as the blazing sunrise, lighting my path to a beautiful life of my own design. The future unfurled, filled with radiant possibility and hope.
Following my father's funeral, a period when discussions about inheritance were common, my brother-in-law, who is married to my sister Sharon, surprisingly claimed that all of my father's assets, including $7 million in cash and stocks, should solely belong to Sharon, the eldest child. This proposal brought joy to my sister and her husband, Yet the lawyer quickly clarified that such a decision wasn't theirs to make. My name is Paul Walker, a 44-year-old sales professional with a wife and 3 kids. My father was a significant shareholder in a company and remained actively involved until his later years. Sharon, my elder sister, has often challenged our parents with her erratic behavior, and even in her middle age, lacks a stable job, choosing to live life on her own terms. Our relationship has been distant, primarily due to my disapproval of her actions. When Sharon turned 52, she unexpectedly introduced us to Russell Brand, a younger, handsome man with a laid-back attitude, and announced their engagement. Despite her financial instability, Sharon didn't hesitate to ask for a substantial sum from our father to cover wedding expenses, quickly depleting it, and then audaciously requesting more. This behavior greatly distressed our father, given her presumptuous attitude towards inheritance. The news of our father's sudden heart attack and subsequent passing deeply affected me. Amidst receiving condolences from friends and relatives, I stepped up to assist my overwhelmed mother with the funeral preparations while Sharon remained absent, engrossed in her own life. The day following the funeral, as my mother and I were beginning to find solace, a lawyer arrived to discuss my father's will. Unaware of its contents, Sharon and her husband audaciously interrupted, asserting that Sharon was entitled to all of my father's stocks and the $7 million inheritance, leaving my mother and me speechless at their boldness. In a moment filled with anticipation, my brother-in-law jubilantly proclaimed, "We've made it, Sharon. This inheritance sets us for life," his fist cutting through the air in triumph. The lawyer, taken aback by such presumption, intervened with caution. Capturing my sister's fierce gaze, he looked at them both squarely and revealed, "Sharon, you have no claim to the inheritance." My sister and her husband, visibly shocked, countered with disbelief, arguing that as the eldest daughter, Sharon was naturally entitled to everything. It was evident my brother-in-law had placed all his bets on this inheritance, convinced it would all go to my sister. Their confusion only deepened when the lawyer, with a gentler tone, dropped a bombshell. "Were you unaware that Sharon is not Mr. Paul's biological child?" Instantly, the color drained from my sister's face as she turned to our mother, her eyes wide with panic. Our mother, her expression a mix of emotions, faced a moment of truth I had long been aware of. My sister was a half-sibling, a fact that had been hidden from her. Confronting our mother, Sharon's voice trembled. "What does this mean?" To which our mother confessed, "Sharon, you come from my first marriage." The revelation stunned Sharon, who had always playfully claimed the title of the favored child. Her husband, trying to grasp at straws, argued that Sharon, being legally adopted, must still be entitled to a share of the inheritance. That's what I assumed Sharon supported. Yet our mother's next words shattered that belief. There had been no formal adoption. In disbelief, Sharon protested, "But I'm the eldest daughter." Dad even acknowledged it. Her frustration now turned towards me accusingly. "You're going to let him take everything." She challenged me. Annoyed by her sense of entitlement, I couldn't help but respond, pointing out her continual reliance on our father's generosity. Despite it, as they insisted on the fairness of a father's support for his daughter, I was reminded of how my sister used his financial aid not for growth, but to bail herself out of recurring predicaments. It was then that Mrs. Paul, our mother, who had been silent, suggested, "Perhaps it's time Sharon reviewed the will as well." Caught off guard, Sharon panicked. "The will? I don't know anything about that." It was her lack of attention and engagement that had led to this moment. Our father had intended for us to discuss the will together when he drafted it, but Sharon, uninterested at the time, chose leisure over matters. Highlighting the omission from the will, I saw my brother-in-law's frustration flare as he sharply questioned Sharon. What were you thinking? This mattered. The realization dawned that they had to confront the contents of my father's will. The lawyer clarified that the inheritance was designated for me and my mother, citing my father's hesitance to adopt Sharon due to her indifferent attitude towards me, her spending habits, and her overall conduct. Sharon was visibly shaken by the news that she had no legal claim to any inheritance. At this revelation, my brother-in-law's temper escalated, accusingly pointing out to Sharon, "You promised there was wealth." His attitude became threatening, shocking my mother and Sharon, though I wasn't surprised, given his history of greed and opportunistic behavior. He coldly told Sharon not to return until she had secured some money, revealing his true motives and leaving everyone in dismay as he abruptly left the scene. Feeling betrayed and cornered, Sharon turned her frustration towards us, particularly our mother, lamenting, "Why wasn't I legally adopted? It's unfair that the inheritance bypasses me." Her outburst was raw and filled with a sense of betrayal, causing a stir that the lawyer witnessed with seasoned calm. When Sharon accused me of being the undeserved beneficiary simply because I was our father's biological son, her words cut deep. But I realized that my existence was not the root of her exclusion. It was her actions and choices. Before the situation could escalate further, the lawyer intervened, warning that her behavior could lead to legal consequences, a reminder that made Sharon pause, likely recalling her previous misdemeanors. As time passed, the inheritance process concluded smoothly, thanks in part to the lawyer's expertise, leaving no room for further dispute from Sharon or her husband. Despite their initial discontent, my mother decided to give Sharon some financial assistance, a gesture I chose not to comment on. Their subsequent disappearance with the funds only underscored their true intentions, leaving a bitter impression among our relatives who were privy to the saga. Seeking to uplift our spirits, I organized a family meal with my mother, wife, and daughter. The outing, suggested by my wife, brought a noticeable change in my mother's demeanor, brightened by the presence of her granddaughter, offering a moment of joy amidst the ongoing family turmoil. During a moment of calm, I suggested to my mom, "How about moving in with us?" But I was quick to add, knowing the unpredictability tied to my sister Sharon, she might drop by seeking help, especially financial. We should be cautious not to enable her too much. My mom's hesitation was palpable. Sharon, despite everything, was her daughter, and the prospect of potentially inviting conflict held her back. I left the offer open for her to ponder. As we approached our ancestral home, we were greeted by an unexpected sight. Lights on in what should have been an empty house. Suspecting Sharon might have returned, I proposed, "Let's have a quick coffee inside." As we got out of the car, suddenly, a car charged towards us, missing us by a whisker. In protecting my wife and responding to my daughter's alarmed cry, I ended up in a flower bed, slightly injured by the fleeting touch of the car, which eventually crashed into the garage entrance. My wife and daughter rushed to my aid, while my mother, frozen with shock, watched from the doorway. The incident led to my hospitalization overnight, and I later found out that Russell Brand, my brother-in-law, was behind the wheel, claiming a mix-up between the accelerator and the brake, a story I found hard to swallow. When my mother and sister visited me in the hospital, Sharon's response to my condition was chilling, hinting at her disappointment in my resilience, almost as if she had hoped for a more beneficial outcome for herself. I couldn't resist commenting on her apparent wish for my demise to claim the inheritance, noting her unease as she averted her gaze. I then revealed that our mother intended to relinquish her inheritance in my favor, making any drastic actions from their side futile. My sister's shock was evident. The concept of foregoing a rightful inheritance seemed alien to her. I further explained that in preparation and following our father's prudent approach, I had already drafted a will ensuring my family's future, thus redirecting the inheritance away from our mother directly to them. My sister's plea for a share from the speculated $7 million, under the guise of familial generosity, only highlighted her desperation and misunderstanding of our family's values and intentions. In the aftermath of firmly rejecting my sister Sharon's demand for a substantial share of the inheritance, the atmosphere in the hospital room shifted dramatically. Sharon's demeanor transformed, her face contorting into a visage of pure fury as she physically accosted me, her hands gripping my collar in desperation. "Give me half. I'm your sister," she demanded, her voice laced with a chilling blend of anger and desperation. It was a distressing sight, witnessing her descent into what appeared to be a state of irrationality, driven to the brink by her intense desire for inheritance. Her actions, so starkly at odds with the values our father held dear, made me regard her with a deep sense of pity and disappointment. "Do you not realize how your greed would have disappointed Dad?" I questioned, hoping to ignite some sense of reason within her. Yet this only served to inflame her anger further as she made a grab for my throat in a shocking escalation of violence. The situation took a dramatic turn when our mother's voice, tinged with alarm and authority, cut through the tension. Nurses quickly intervened, escorting a visibly shaken Sharon away from me. Despite the turmoil, it was evident that my mother's heart ached for Sharon, her biological daughter, even though Sharon had directed her vitriol towards her as well. Where did I go wrong in raising her? My mother lamented, a question heavy with sorrow and regret that echoed in the sterile hospital corridor. The emotional and physical toll of the incident was soon overshadowed by my mother's deteriorating health. As her condition worsened, my wife and I found ourselves more involved in her day-to-day care, a development that seemed to provoke Sharon's resentment. Her feelings of exclusion were palpable, especially as she confronted the reality of our increased presence in our mother's life. This tension reached a boiling point when Sharon, in an abrupt phone call, insisted that she and Russell would take over caring for our mother, effectively sidelining my wife and me. Her declaration was unexpected and filled with a certainty that brooked no argument. Despite my attempts to reason with her, to discuss what was best for our mother, Sharon remained unmoved, ending the call with a finality that left us stunned. Confirming this sudden shift with my wife, who had received a similar message, we were both left concerned for our mother's well-being, especially considering Sharon and Russell's lack of experience in caregiving and household management. Surprisingly, Russell claimed to have some caregiving experience, a small comfort given our mother's still manageable level of independence. Yet this reassurance was short-lived. Within a month, a grave medication error sent our mother to the hospital, her condition alarmingly frail. It was a mistake that was unlike her, known for her meticulousness, especially with her medication. As my wife remained by my mother's bedside, offering the support and love she needed, I ventured back to the family home. What greeted me was a scene of neglect. A bare refrigerator, a poignant reminder of my mother's once vibrant love for cooking, and the absence of the household help that had been a staple in our family's life. The disarray spoke volumes of the care, or lack thereof, that Sharon and Russell had promised, casting a long shadow over their capability to manage the responsibilities they had so confidently claimed they could handle. Discovering that a considerable sum of money had been withdrawn from my mother's bank account filled me with regret for ever placing trust in my sister. Despite the safety measures, with her bank card and PIN securely locked away, the funds meant for everyday expenses had nearly vanished. While thankfully the inheritance remained safe in a separate deposit box, this breach of trust prompted me to collect necessary items for my mother's hospital stay, including her bank card, to address the financial anomaly. Upon discussing the situation with my mother, it became apparent she was oblivious to the mishandling of her bank card. Yet when the conversation shifted to the medication mishap, a shadow of sorrow crossed her face as she admitted it was Russell, my brother-in-law, who had prepared it. The suggestion that Sharon should no longer be welcomed into the house seemed more urgent than ever. My mother's condition and the chaotic state of our home were alarming. "Mom, you need to stay with us," I insisted, envisioning a peaceful home for her recovery. Despite this, her health worsened, possibly exacerbated by stress, leading to her untimely demise. The somber task of arranging her funeral revealed a grim reality. The family home was stripped of its valuables, a testament to my sister and Russell's relentless greed. The emptiness of the house mirrored my feelings of shock and betrayal, fueling a resolve to seek justice for their egregious actions. The aftermath of my mother's funeral set the stage for a meeting with the lawyer, where my sister audaciously claimed her entitlement to our mother's inheritance. Her confidence wavered as the will was read, revealing her exclusion from any inheritance, a directive from our father reflecting his final wishes. Russell's outrage at this revelation only compounded the tension, his frustration manifesting in a destructive outburst. Amidst his tirade, I confronted him with a pressing question, one that hinted at a dark suspicion. "Russell, did you attempt to harm my mom?" The gravity of the situation hung in the air, marking a pivotal moment in our family saga as we awaited his response. The truth of their actions was poised to come to light under the scrutiny of the law. As I squarely faced him, Russell returned my inquiry with a look of irritation. "I've done nothing wrong," he defensively claimed when questioned about the medication error. His annoyance was palpable, emphasizing their fixation on the inheritance rather than the well-being of our mother. Sharon, losing any semblance of calm, chimed in, outraged at the prospect of being left out of the inheritance. Her reaction betrayed her motives. It wasn't concern for our mother that drove her, but rather the hope of solving her financial woes with the inheritance. "Is it true that I'm getting nothing?" She demanded an explanation from the lawyer, her voice a mix of disbelief and desperation. The lawyer began to outline the specifics of the inheritance distribution, taking into account the funds Sharon had prematurely withdrawn and the value of the items she had sold. The end result left little to nothing for her, a revelation that left her visibly frustrated. I couldn't help but interject, highlighting that this outcome was the result of careful legal consultation. "That can't be all that's left," Sharon muttered, a clear indication of her disillusionment with the reality of her financial dependency on our parents, never having to face the struggles of earning a living. My disappointment in her turned to anger. "Mom thought you'd look after her, but instead you just took her money and left her alone," I accused, unable to hide my disdain for her actions. Sharon retorted, demanding evidence of the expenses incurred for our mother's care. I challenged her to justify the spending, extending my hand for the receipts, knowing full well she had none. "I don't have them," she stammered, her confidence waning. The lawyer underscored the importance of such documentation, leaving Sharon at a loss for words. Russell then tried to appeal to my sense of family, urging me to support Sharon despite everything, but my resolve was unshaken. Their desperation was evident, and Russell's admission that Sharon would have inherited everything if their plan had succeeded only added to my suspicion of their true intentions. "What do you mean by that?" I pressed, seeking clarity on his revealing comment, ready to uncover the extent of their schemes. As the tension in the room escalated, Russell inadvertently made a comment that shifted the atmosphere drastically, revealing their true intentions. Because of this guy, things never go right. I was expecting a new car out of this deal, but now I'm stuck with just enough for some repairs, he lamented, not realizing the weight of his words. My sister Sharon attempted to intervene, perhaps to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. The lawyer, seizing the moment, underscored the gravity of Russell's admission. "That's a serious allegation, akin to fraud," she observed, barely concealing a smile as she eyed the couple. Her next revelation caught them off guard. "This meeting has been recorded with your consent," she reminded, effectively trapping Russell in his own narrative. Realizing the depth of his blunder, Russell's confidence deflated. Seizing the moment, I informed him of my intentions to press charges for the accident. Russell's attempt to dismiss the threat as baseless was quickly undermined by his own words, now recorded evidence. The situation spiraled for them as Sharon, overwhelmed by the turn of events, berated Russell for his carelessness, despairing over their predicament. In the aftermath, Russell faced criminal charges, his prior misdeeds compounding the legal action against him, leading to his arrest. Sharon, implicated for her role, received a milder sentence due to her lesser involvement. Facing financial ruin, she reached out to relatives for support, only to be met with rejection, a consequence of her actions and their fallout. As for me, witnessing the unraveling of my sister and brother-in-law schemes brought a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. The path they chose not only led to their downfall, but also strained familial bonds, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. I kept on working hard, choosing not to depend on any inheritance. Instead, I found comfort and a bit of joy in the dividends that came from my investments in stocks, considering it a small but satisfying reward for my efforts. Scott's "Get out of my house, you crazy woman." The words play over and over in my head as I sit on the curb outside with tears streaming. I still feel the pain of his hands as they pushed me to the ground and saw in his eyes how I was garbage. And this is how my 61st B-Day turns out, treating me like dirt ashes on his feet. It's like I haven't spent my entire life loving him, raising him, and sacrificing for him. Now, because of that awful wife of his, he can't even stand the sight of me. Rachel, even her name, makes my blood boil. From the moment Scott brought her home, I knew she was trouble. The way she looked at me like I was just an obstacle in her path. The way she whispered in Scott's ear, turning him against me little by little. I warned him not to marry her, begged him to see through her manipulations. But he was blinded by lust, by the idea that she loved him unconditionally. Ha! The only thing that a woman loves is herself. And now, because of her, I've lost everything: my son, my grandchildren, the family I've dedicated my life to. I've been cast aside like yesterday's trash. As I sit there wallowing in my misery, a car pulls up beside me. The window rolls down, revealing the concerned face of my best friend, Sabrina. "Damn, what happened?" "What are you doing out here?" she asks, her voice full of worry. I can barely choke out the words. Scott, he kicked me out. Said I was crazy and that it was his house now. Sabrina's eyes widen in shock, then narrow in anger. "He did what?" "On your birthday." "Oh, honey, get in the car. You're coming home with me." I climb into the passenger seat, my body numb as Sabrina drives. She keeps glancing over at me, her brow furrowed. "This is unacceptable, Sarah. Scott can't treat you like this. Something has to be done." I shake my head sadly. "What can I do, Sabrina? He's a grown man. He's made his choice." Sabrina purses her lips, a determined look in her eye. "Maybe so, but that doesn't mean he gets to get away with it. You're his mother, for God's sake. It's time Scott and that awful wife of his learned there are consequences for their actions." I turn to her, confused. "What are you saying?" A slow smile spreads across Sabrina's face. "I'm saying, my dear, that it's time for a little revenge. And I know just the person to help us get it." As we speed into the night, I feel a flicker of something I haven't felt in a long time, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I can make Scott and Rachel pay for the pain they've caused. Maybe karma will finally catch up to them. The day started off well enough. It was my birthday, and despite everything that had happened with Scott, I was determined to make the most of it. I spent the morning tidying up the house, putting up a few decorations, and preparing a special dinner. I even bought a cake from the bakery down the street, the one Scott always loved as a kid. Around noon, I called Scott, my heart fluttering with a mix of hope and worry. To my surprise, he actually answered. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" His tone was neutral, guarded. I took a deep breath. "Well, I was wondering if you, Rachel, and the kids would like to come over for dinner tonight. It's my birthday, and I thought it would be nice to spend some time together as a family." There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, like he was discussing it with someone. Finally, he spoke. "Yeah, okay, we could do that." Relief washed over me. "How about 5:00 p.m.? I'm making your favorite lasagna." "Sure, see you then." He hung up before I could say anything else. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. By the time 5:00 p.m. rolled around, everything was perfect. The lasagna was bubbling in the oven, the table was set, and the cake was proudly displayed on the counter. Right on time, the doorbell rang. I practically ran to answer it, a huge smile on my face. But the moment I opened the door, my heart sank. Scott stood there, a scowl etched on his face. Beside him was Rachel, her lips curled into a sneer. The kids were nowhere to be seen. "Where are the children?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rachel let out a harsh laugh. "We decided it was best if they didn't come. Wouldn't want them exposed to any more of your toxic influence." I felt like I'd been slapped. Toxic influence? What are you talking about? She stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. "Don't play dumb, Sarah. We all know what a terrible mother you were. The way you turned Scott against his own father, the constant guilt-tripping and manipulation. It's no wonder he wants nothing to do with you." Tears stung my eyes. I looked to Scott, silently pleading for him to defend me. But he just stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing. "That's not true," I managed to choke out. "I've always loved and supported Scott. I would never do anything to hurt him." Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. "Drop the martyr act. You're nothing but a selfish, vindictive woman who can't accept that Scott has moved on with his life, that he chose me over you." Something inside me snapped. Before I knew it, I lunged forward, ready to slap that smug look off her face. But Scott stepped between us, grabbing my wrist in a painful grip. "Don't you dare touch my wife," he growled. "You're pathetic, you know that. Coming up with this whole birthday charade, trying to warn your way back in. Well, it's not going to work. We're done with you." With that, he shoved me backward, sending me stumbling. I caught myself on the doorframe, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. "Scott, please," I whispered. "I'm your mother." But he just shook his head, his eyes cold. "Not anymore." "Come on, Rachel, let's go." I watched helplessly as they turned and walked away, slamming the door behind them. The sound echoed through the empty house, a brutal finality to it. There I stood, alone on my birthday, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the aftermath of Scott and Rachel's cruelty. Minutes, hours, it all blurred together. The pain in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt before, a deep aching void that threatened to swallow me whole. Eventually, I managed to close the door, my hand shaking. I stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto the cushions as sobs racked my body. How could he do this to me? My own son, treating me like I was nothing. after I had spent my entire life loving and caring for him. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me out of my despair. I glanced at the screen and saw Sabrina's name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, not wanting to burden her with my problems. But the thought of facing this alone was too much to bear. I answered, my voice thick with tears. "Hello. Sarah, what's wrong? Did something happen with Spot?" The concern in her voice was my undoing. I broke down, the whole story spilling out between gasps and sobs. Sabrina listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. "That's it," she said firmly when I finished. "This has gone too far, Sarah. Scott and Rachel can't keep treating you like this. It's time for them to face some consequences." I sniffled, wiping my eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time for a little payback. They think they can just walk all over you, but they've got another thing coming. You're a strong woman, Sarah. It's time to start acting like it." Her words ignited a spark within me, a flicker of anger amidst the pain. She was right. I couldn't just sit here and wallow. I needed to do something to take back control. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "What did you have in mind?" I could practically hear Sabrina's grin through the phone. "Meet me at the diner in an hour. I've got someone I want you to meet. Trust me, he's going to be a big help." An hour later, I was sitting across from Sabrina in a booth at the local diner. She had a mischievous glint in her eye as she sipped her coffee. "So who is this mystery person?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. As if on cue, the bell above the door jingled. Sabrina waved at someone behind me. There he is now. I turned, my eyes widening as a tall, broad-shouldered man approached our table. He had a rugged look about him, like someone who had seen his fair share of trouble. "Sarah, meet my brother James," Sabrina said, gesturing for him to sit. James nodded at me, his gaze assessing. "Sabrina filled me in on your situation. I'm sorry to hear about what your son and his wife did." "That's rough," I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant even as the pain twisted in my gut. "It is what it is, but Sabrina seems to think you can help." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I can. In my line of work, I've learned that everyone has secrets, skeletons in their closet. And from what Sabrina's told me, I'm betting your daughter-in-law has more than a few." A tingle of anticipation ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" James smiled, slow and dangerous. "I'm saying let me dig into Rachel's past. If there's dirt to be found, I'll find it. And once we have that information, well, let's just say karma has a way of coming back around." I sat back, my mind spinning with possibilities. Could this really work? Could I finally make Scott and Rachel pay for what they had done? Looking into James's confident eyes, I made my decision. "I'm in. Let's do this." He nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. Give me a week. I'll be in touch." As he stood to leave, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. They thought they could break me, but they were wrong. It was time for revenge. The week crawled by, each day feeling like an eternity. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into cleaning the house, running errands, anything to distract from the constant churn of my thoughts. What would James find? Would it be enough to bring Scott and Rachel to their knees? Sabrina checked in on me daily, offering words of encouragement and support. She was the only thing keeping me sane, the only person who truly understood the depth of my pain and anger. Finally, on the 7th day, my phone rang. It was James. "Sarah, it's me. I've got something. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" My heart leaped into my throat. Of course I'll be there. I arrived at James' office with 10 minutes to spare. My nerves jingled. Sabrina was already there, pacing the small waiting area. She gave me a tight hug when I entered. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, searching my face. I nodded, steeling myself. "As ready as I'll ever be." James emerged from his office with a grim expression on his face. "Come on in, ladies." We settled into the chairs opposite his desk, the air thick with tension. James opened a manila folder, spreading out a series of documents and photographs. So I did some digging into Rachel's background. He began again, tapping the papers. "And let me tell you, this woman is no saint." He slid a document towards me. "First off, she has a criminal record, embezzlement from her previous job. She managed to avoid jail time, but it wasn't pretty." I stared at the paper, a mugshot of Rachel staring back at me. She looked younger, but those cold eyes were unmistakable. "But that's not all," James continued, his voice grave. "I also found out that she's a person of interest in the death of her ex-boyfriend." Sabrina gasped, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. James handed me a newspaper clipping. 3 years ago, her ex was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The police suspected foul play, but could never prove anything. Rachel was the last person to see him alive. I scanned the article, my eyes catching on phrases like suspicious death and ongoing investigation. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile this information with the woman my son had married. "So what does this mean?" Sabrina asked, voicing the question I couldn't. James leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "It means we have leverage. It means that if this information were to come to light, Rachel's life as she knows it would be over. Her reputation, her marriage, everything." A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. "So what do we do now?" A slow smile spread across James's face. "Now we use it. We let Rachel know that we have this information, and if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Scott to make things right with you." Sabrina nodded, her eyes gleaming. "And if she refuses?" James shrugged. "Then we go to the police. We let them reopen the investigation into her ex's death. One way or another, Rachel will face the consequences of her actions." I sat there, stunned, trying to process it all. Could it really be this simple? Could I really make Rachel pay for what she'd done, for turning Scott against me? Looking at the determination in Sabrina's and James's faces, I felt a surge of strength. They believed in me, believed that I deserved justice. And for the first time since that awful birthday, I believed it too. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. "Let's make them pay." James grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Excellent. Give me a day to put everything in motion." By this time tomorrow, Rachel won't know what hit her. As we left the office, Sabrina squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, Sarah. Don't ever doubt that." I squeezed back, feeling a sense of purpose and righteous anger. They had picked the wrong woman to mess with. It was time for Rachel to learn that lesson. True to his word, James called me the next day. "It's done," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. I sent all the information to Rachel, along with a little message letting her know that if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Scott to make amends with you. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Do you think it will work?" "Only one way to find out," James replied. "But trust me, with the dirt we have on her, she'd be crazy not to comply." I hung up, my mind racing. Would Rachel really cave? Would she really force Scott to apologize and make things right? A part of me dared to hope, even as another part whispered that it was too good to be true. Hours passed with no word. I paced my living room, jumping at every sound, convinced it was the doorbell or the phone. But as evening fell, there was still nothing. Just as I was about to give up and go to bed, there was a pounding at the door. My heart in my throat, I opened it to find Scott standing there, his face full of anger. "What the hell did you do?" he snarled, pushing past me into the house. I stumbled back, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" He turned on me, his eyes blazing. "Don't play dumb. Rachel told me everything. About the private investigator, about you digging up her past. What, you thought you could blackmail her into making me forgive you?" I stood my ground, lifting my chin. I didn't blackmail anyone. I simply let her know that her actions have consequences, that she can't just destroy my life and get away with it. Scott let out a harsh laugh. "Destroy your life? Are you serious? You're the one who's trying to destroy our marriage, our family. First with your constant guilt-tripping and manipulation, and now this." Anger surged through me, hot and bright. "I'm not the one who turned you against me, Scott. That was all Rachel. She's poisoned, can't you see that? She's a criminal, a liar, maybe even a murderer." For a moment, Scott looked stunned. Then his face hardened. "You're unbelievable. You really think I'm going to believe your crazy accusations over my own wife, the mother of my children? They're not accusations. They're facts. James found proof." "I don't care what your little detective friend found," Scott roared. "Rachel is my wife, and I trust her. I love her, and nothing you say or do is going to change that." Tears stung my eyes, blurring my vision. "So that's it then? You're choosing her over me, your own mother?" Scott's jaw clenched. "You made that choice for me the moment you decided to pull this stunt. I'm done with you, Mom. Done with your lies, your schemes, all of it." He turned to leave, and panic seized me. "Scott, please." I called out, but he was already gone, slamming the door behind him. The finality shook me to my core. I sank to the floor, sobs tearing from my throat. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The truth was supposed to set me free, to bring Scott back to me. Instead, it had only driven him further away. Through my tears, I heard my phone ringing. It was James. I answered, my voice thick and shaky. "Sarah, what happened? Did it work?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "No, it didn't work, James. Scott, he's gone. He chose Rachel." There was a pause, then James spoke, his tone determined. "Then we move on to Plan B. We go to the police, get them to reopen the investigation into Rachel's ex's death." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "What's the point? It won't change anything. Scott made his choice." "This isn't about Scott anymore," James said firmly. "This is about justice, about making sure Rachel pays for what she's done, one way or another." I closed my eyes, exhaustion and grief washing over me. Could I do it? Could I really destroy my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren? But then I remembered the look in Scott's eyes, the venom in his voice, the way Rachel had smirked, so smug and self-satisfied. They had brought this on themselves, and now they would face the consequences. "Okay," I whispered, a new resolve hardening in my chest. "Let's do it. Let's make her pay." The next few days were a blur of activity. James and I gathered all the evidence he had collected, organizing it into a neat package to present to the police. Sabrina was a constant presence, offering support and encouragement when my resolve wavered. Finally, the day arrived. We walked into the police station, heads held high, ready to blow the lid off Rachel's sordid past. The detective listened intently as we laid out our case, his brow furrowing as he examined the documents and photographs. When we finished, he sat back, a grim expression on his face. This is serious stuff," he said, tapping the file. "If what you're saying is true, we have grounds to reopen the investigation into Miss Michael's ex-boyfriend's death." I felt a surge of vindication. It is true. Every word of it, I affirmed. The detective nodded. All right then, leave this with me. I'll get the ball rolling. We left the station, a sense of anticipation thrumming through me. It was really happening. Rachel was finally going to face the music. 5 days later, I received a call from James. Turn on the news, he said, a note of triumph in his voice. I did as he said, my heart pounding, as the anchor's face filled the screen. Breaking news, she announced, her expression serious. Local woman Rachel Michael has been arrested in connection with the previously unsolved death of her ex-boyfriend, Andrew Huberman. New evidence has come to light, prompting police to reopen the investigation. I watched transfixed as they showed footage of Rachel being led out of her and Scott's house in handcuffs, her face a mix of shock and anger. Scott followed behind, looking stunned and lost. A fierce satisfaction burned in my chest. She was finally getting what she deserved. But my joy was short-lived. The news report went on to describe how Scott had to use their savings to post Rachel's bail and hire a lawyer. It was a financial blow, one that would undoubtedly strain their marriage. I should have felt guilty, knowing that I had played a part in their hardship. But all I could think was that it served them right. They had brought this on themselves with their cruelty and deceit. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as the drama unfolded. Rachel's arrest made headlines, and the court of public opinion was merciless. Speculation ran rampant about her involvement in her ex's death and what other secrets she might be hiding. Scott put on a brave face, standing by his wife in public. But I could see the toll it was taking. He looked haggard, worn down by the constant scrutiny and whispers. A part of me yearned to reach out, to offer comfort and support. But I hardened my heart, reminding myself of the way he had cast me aside, the vicious words he had hurled at me. He had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. One afternoon, as I was returning from the grocery store, I spotted a familiar figure on my doorstep. It was Scott, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. For a moment, I considered ignoring him, pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" I asked coldly as I approached, my arms laden with bags. Scott looked up, his expression a mix of exhaustion and desperation. "Mom, I need your help." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now you need my help. What happened to me and my schemes?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. I know, he said. "I said some awful things. But this is bigger than that. Rachel's in real trouble, Mom. The evidence against her, it's bad." A flicker of doubt passed through me. "What are you saying?" Scott's voice broke. "I'm saying I don't know what to do. The lawyer fees are bankrupting us, and if Rachel goes to prison, I can't raise the kids on my own. I need you, Mom, please." I stared at him, torn between the urge to comfort him and the desire to lash out. He looked so broken, so defeated. But then I remembered the pain he had caused, the way he had abandoned me. I straightened my spine, my voice cold. "You should have thought of that before you turned your back on me. I'm sorry, Scott, but you're on your own with that." I brushed past him, ignoring his pleas and apologies. He had made his choice, and now he would live with the consequences. A few days after Scott's desperate visit, I received an unexpected call. It was Rachel's mother, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "Sarah, I know we've had our differences, but I need to ask a favor," she said, the words seeming to pain her. I felt a flicker of surprise. What kind of favor? "It's the kids. With everything going on with Rachel's case, Scott's struggling to keep up. He needs a break. I was hoping you could take the children for the weekend." I hesitated, torn. On one hand, the thought of spending time with my grandchildren filled me with longing. It had been so long since I'd seen them. But on the other hand, the idea of helping Scott and Rachel after everything they had done to me was hard to accept. "Please, Sarah," Rachel's mother pressed, sensing my reluctance. "I know you love those kids. They need some stability right now, and Lord knows they won't get it from Scott or Rachel." I sighed, my resolve crumbling. She was right. Whatever issues I had with their parents, my grandchildren were innocent. They deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this mess. "All right," I agreed finally. "I'll take them for the weekend. But I'm doing this for them, not for Scott or Rachel." "Of course." "Thank you, Sarah. I'll let Scott know to drop them off Friday evening." True to her word, Scott arrived on my doorstep that Friday with the kids in tow. He looked even worse than the last time I'd seen him, his face gaunt and shadowed. "Mom," he greeted me, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it." I nodded stiffly, my attention on the children. They looked up at me, their eyes wide and uncertain. "Grandma." My granddaughter cried, breaking into a smile. She rushed forward, wrapping her little arms around my waist. I hugged her back, blinking back sudden tears. "Hello, sweetheart. I've missed you." My grandson was more reserved, hovering by Scott's side. I knelt down, opening my arms. "Come here, buddy. It's okay." Slowly, he stepped into my embrace, his small body trembling. My heart ached for him, for both of them. Scott cleared his throat. "I'll pick them up Sunday evening. If anything comes up, just give me a call." I straightened, meeting his gaze coolly. "We'll be fine." With a final nod, he left, leaving me alone with the kids. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Who wants pizza for dinner? The weekend passed in a blur of laughter, games, and stories. For a little while, I was able to forget the drama and heartache, lost in the simple joy of being with my grandchildren. But all too soon, it was over. Scott arrived to collect the kids, his expression guarded. As they gathered their things, "Grandma, can we come stay with you again soon?" We had so much fun. My granddaughter tugged on my hand. I smiled, smoothing her hair. "Of course, honey, anytime you want." Scott's jaw tightened. "We should get going." "Say goodbye, kids." They hugged me tightly, their little faces sad. I watched as they climbed into Scott's car, my heart heavy. As he prepared to leave, Scott paused, turning back to me. "Listen, Mom, about what they said. I don't want you getting any ideas." This was a one-time thing. I bristled, anger sparking. "Excuse me. You think I'm trying to turn them against you?" "Wouldn't be the first time," he muttered. I saw red. "How dare you?" I have done nothing but love and support those children, which is more than I can say for you and Rachel. You're so wrapped up in your own drama, you can't even see how much they're hurting. Scott's face flushed. "You have no idea what we're going through, no idea the stress, the pressure." "And whose fault is that?" I cut him off. "You chose this, Scott. You chose Rachel and all the chaos that comes with her. Don't you dare put that on me." He stared at me, his eyes hard. "This isn't over, Mom. I won't let you poison my kids against me, the way you did with Dad." With that, he got in the car and drove away, leaving me shaking with rage and hurt. I stood there watching until the car disappeared from view, a cold determination settling over me. If Scott wanted to play hardball, then so be it. I was done playing nice. It was time to end this once and for all. The day of Rachel's trial arrived, cold and gray. I dressed with care, choosing a somber black suit that radiated quiet authority. Sabrina picked me up, her face set with grim determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we drove to the courthouse. I nodded, my jaw tight. I've been ready for a long time. We met James on the steps, his expression serious. I've got a surprise for you, he said, leading us inside. I tracked down Andrew Huberman's family. They're here to testify. I felt a surge of gratitude and vindication. With their testimony, Rachel's fate would be sealed. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, my heart pounding. As Rachel was led in, her wrists and ankles shackled, she looked pale and drawn, but her eyes still glittered with malice when they met mine. Scott sat stiffly beside her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I looked away, focusing on the judge as he called the court to order. The trial was grueling and emotional. The prosecutor laid out the evidence against Rachel in damning detail, painting a picture of a cruel, calculating woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. But it was the testimony of Andrew Huberman's family that truly sealed her fate. His mother, a frail, silver-haired woman, spoke of her son's kind heart, his bright future cut short. His sister wept as she recounted Rachel's controlling, abusive behavior, and how she had isolated Andrew from his loved ones. Through it all, Rachel sat stone-faced, her eyes cold and empty. Scott grew more and more agitated, his knee bouncing, his hands clenched into fists. Finally, it was time for the verdict. The jury filed back in, their faces somber. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. In the matter of the state versus Rachel Michael, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Rachel's face drained of color, her mouth falling open. Scott leaped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "No," he shouted, his voice raw with anguish. "No, this is wrong. She's innocent." The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Mr. Michael, control yourself, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Scott subsided, collapsing back into his seat, his head in his hands. Rachel turned to him, her expression desperate. "Scott, do something. You can't let them do this to me." But Scott wouldn't look at her, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The bailiff stepped forward, preparing to lead Rachel away. I watched with a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. Triumph, yes, but also a hollow sort of sadness. It had come to this, my own son broken and humiliated, his love life in ruins. As Rachel was escorted out, she turned back, her eyes locking with mine. In that moment, I saw the depth of her hatred, the venom in her soul. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low and deadly. "I'll make you pay for this. I swear it." I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. "You've already paid, Rachel. You made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. Goodbye." With that, I turned and walked out, my head held high. It was over. Justice had been served. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the lingering unease. Scott's anguished face haunted me. Had I gone too far? Had my quest for vengeance blinded me to the collateral damage? I shook my head, pushing the doubts aside. No, Scott had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. He had chosen Rachel and turned his back on me. Now he would have to live with the fallout. I stepped out into the cold, gray day, drawing my coat tighter around me. It was time to move on, to build a new life for myself. A life without Scott, without Rachel's toxic influence, a life of my own making. I was stuck in a marriage with my egocentric, egotistical husband and our antithetical son for 18 years. Then I stood by my husband, supporting him as his wife for 10 other years. But one day of the week is correct. You know I'm going to divorce you. What? Divorce? Why all of a sudden? I know you've been cheating. I am not going to demand equitable division of assets, but I will keep $300,000 in savings in the house. No, I don't understand. Despite never having cheated, I was suddenly being pushed towards divorce. It didn't make sense. As the conversation about divorce began, I desperately tried to stop it. But upon further thought, there was no evidence, just baseless accusations. He had also never helped with raising our child and had been repeating abusive behaviors. Maybe it was time for a divorce. Okay, I understand. I'll leave then. You might as well become homeless. He smirked as he kicked me out. But I left with a refreshed look on my face. Then I visited a certain person a month later. After that, nobody expected that my husband would call me almost crying. I lived in a single-family home in LA with my husband. I used to be a full-time employee at a small to medium-sized company in LA, but I quit when we got married. Afterward, household chores, including preparing meals, became my top priority. As I got used to this life, I started working part-time at a local supermarket. After we bought our house and started paying it off, my part-time income allowed us to live a comfortable life, just the two of us. A year after we got married, I discovered I was pregnant. We had been trying to have a child, and given our financial situation, raising one child would be our limit. This pregnancy was a joyous occasion. My husband burst into joy as if he were a child receiving a birthday present. From that day on, I was filled with dreams of a happy life with our future child, even making it hard to focus on household chores. Tomorrow, I'm bringing a junior colleague over for drinks at home. Please prepare the alcohol. Hot drinking here, not going out. It's been a while, and we decided to talk about work while drinking at home. It wouldn't be right to impose on my junior's home, and I want to show off our new house. But I have severe morning sickness. Just this much. I have to maintain my position as a senior. My husband was happy about my pregnancy and talked only about the baby after returning from work. If it's a boy, I'll go to the park to play catch with him, buy him a remote control toy for his birthday, and play together in the park. And when he's bigger, I'd like to go motorcycling with him. Every day, he was full of talk about our future child, but his consideration for me was minimal. If he was so excited about the child, he could be a bit more considerate of me as a pregnant woman. To ensure that my beloved child is born healthy, I need to maintain a proper lifestyle during pregnancy. He has many female friends, some of whom are pregnant. He must have heard various things from them. Now that I was in the toughest phase of morning sickness, he should have considered having colleagues over for drinks at home would be a burden on me. Of course, I understand his position at the company, but still, I guess I had accepted that at the time. Hey, we're out of alcohol. Oh, it's getting late, and it's not right for your wife. We should be leaving soon. We're off tomorrow, so we'll drink until morning. Come on, everyone has plans tomorrow. Maybe it's time for them all to leave. Shut up. Just do as your husband says. Since we're running low on alcohol, go get some more. Not again. I had seen that at our wedding after party. When he drinks, he becomes a domineering husband. When we were dating, I didn't drink much, so we hardly went out for drinks. At that time, I thought he was a considerate man. But it turns out he changes when he drinks. After we got married, he completely looked down on me and bossed me around, which was shocking. But as long as we controlled the amount of alcohol, it should be fine. Usually, he acts without thinking ahead, but he was kind to me, so I didn't think it was much of a problem. But I never expected the domineering husband to emerge during this tough phase of morning sickness. It was completely unexpected, but now that it had come to this, there was no stopping it. What a troublesome situation. I'm suffering from morning sickness, and it's usually my bedtime, so I just want to go to sleep quickly. I haven't even taken a bath yet, and with people around, I can't relax. I felt sorry for the juniors who looked ready to leave, but since my senior husband wouldn't let them, they couldn't just leave on their own. As I reluctantly got up to get the alcohol as my husband had instructed, one considerate junior offered to go instead. "I'll go so you can rest." Huh, but I can't let a guest do that. My wife gave birth last year, so I understand what pregnant women go through. Sorry for keeping you up so late. Since my husband had talked about my pregnancy at his company, the junior was considerate of me as a pregnant woman. It surprised me that a younger person could be so considerate while my husband was drunk to this extent. I was embarrassed by my own husband, but I decided to accept the junior's kind offer. After about 10 minutes, the junior returned with more alcohol, smiled at me, and headed straight to the living room. About an hour later, he kept giving my husband strong drinks, and soon he fell asleep in the living room. Taking advantage of this, I apologized to the juniors for keeping them up late and asked them to leave. Then I went to bed by myself. Perhaps because of the morning sickness and staying up late, I was struck by a severe headache the following day. However, my husband, completely hungover, woke up around noon and was noisy about wanting soup made for him because he had a headache. The morning sickness hadn't subsided yet, and I really wasn't in a state to be looking after a hungover husband. But I didn't want to complain about his bad mood while hungover, so I forced my weary body to make some simple soup and quickly finished up the housework. "Here's the soup. Eat it before it cools. Yeah, and draw a bath for me too. I feel gross." Since I didn't bathe yesterday, okay. If those days had continued daily, I might have reached my limit. But my husband became busier with work, so my burden didn't increase. Especially after that, while I still did the housework and cooking as before, the memory of that drinking session was vividly etched in my brain. So life until birth wasn't that tough. Then I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He weighed 8.5 pounds, a big boy. He looked a lot like my husband around the eyes, and his large body resembled my tall husband. I wondered if he might grow up to be a man who thinks only of himself. But I was so happy that I cried when my husband first held our son. He was so moved that he was at a loss for words, and seeing him like that made me smile broadly. At that time, I had forgotten all about his bad traits, and all I could think about was the happy life that the three of us would start together. "Hey, can you start sleeping downstairs from today? The baby's crying at night is loud, and it wakes me up." "Huh? Sleep on the first floor? But that room is used as a storage room." "But seriously, it's so noisy." "It's fine if you can calm the crying, but sometimes it lasts over an hour. It's annoying." The happy life with the three of us lasted only a week after we left the hospital. The baby's crying at night is indeed loud, but that's part of raising a child. I wouldn't let it be said that he doesn't know the first thing about raising a child. Despite nearly a year of pregnancy, it's natural for babies to cry, and it's a sign they're growing properly. There are many, many difficult things, but I had intended to raise our child together as a couple. Yet the responsibility of childcare was all pushed onto me. While saying all might be an exaggeration, to be precise, all the difficult parts of parenting were pushed onto me. My husband would eagerly do the fun things like feeding milk or playing when the baby was in a good mood. If you look only at that, you might think, what a good husband. But it's just like a selfish child who plays house and leaves all the messy chores to the parents. I was sleep-deprived every night from the baby crying and had no rest because I also had to do the housework. Gradually, my dissatisfaction with my husband built up. Hey, I think it's wrong to push all the hard stuff onto me. You need to take care of the baby on weekends at least, or my physical strength won't last. What childcare? It's your job as the mother. You do it. I'm earning money by going to work instead. Try to put yourself in my shoes, being woken up by the baby crying every night. It's not just physically draining. I'm at my mental limit. There are single mothers out there raising kids. Isn't that just your weakness? Just because there are single mothers out there doesn't mean I am the same. Should I say the same thing back? There are many men in the world who come home from work and do all the housework, look after the children on weekends, or employ a housekeeper so they can focus solely on parenting. What would he think if I said that? Not only does my husband act without thinking ahead, but he also seems incapable of considering other people's feelings. He might be tired from work, but he has weak hands-off. He comes home on time and can relax at night. But I am chased by housework and childcare from morning, and I can hardly sleep at night. Seeing my husband resting comfortably while I am going through such a hard time made me increasingly irritable. But being a mother means that maternal instincts naturally develop to match the situation. After realizing that my husband was not cooperative in parenting, I gradually became mentally stronger and decided not to rely on him for childcare. Time flew by, and by the time our son was ready to start elementary school, I was gradually able to step back a bit and return to work while managing the household, bringing some change to our life. Mom, are you okay? Are you feeling sick? I'm fine, just a bit sleep-deprived recently. It's because Dad brings his coworkers home, right? And he doesn't help around the house. It's okay, Dad has his work obligations, so it can't be helped, but he doesn't think about you at all. So I don't really like him much. As my son reached school age and began to understand various things, he became a mental ally for me, and the relationship between my husband and me continued to cool. My husband continued his selfish behavior, which probably didn't look good in our son's eyes. While I was pregnant, there were times when my husband talked about doing this or that with our son, but now he barely interferes with our son, and we are living a life completely opposite to the happy family life of 3 I had once dreamed of. Then my son grew up smoothly and started living alone for university. After nearly 20 years, my husband and I resumed living as just the 2 of us. It felt strange because I had talked so little with my husband since the time we lived with our son. Hey, I've been invited to an inn owned by an acquaintance. Do you want to go together next time? That sounds like a hassle. I'm not going. But they've prepared a room for 2. I don't have fun with you around. When did he even lose interest in me? Of course, our marital life had become less intimate over the years, and my husband had completely disengaged from parenting, leading to a lack of connection between us. I thought that with the 2 of us living together again, we could slowly mend our relationship, but it seems he has no interest at all. Maybe it's pointless for me to try so hard. Yet after nearly 20 years of marriage, the thought of divorcing now seemed absurd, so I just let our life drag on. This stagnant lifestyle continued for about 8 years until one holiday when my husband was off work. Even though we were both home, it didn't mean we did anything together or went out. Usually, he would go golfing with colleagues on his days off, but that day he didn't go anywhere. We sat in silence, each of us on our phones, when suddenly, I'm giving you 1 month to move out of this house. What? You can't just spring this on me. What do you mean? You think I haven't noticed? You've been gallivanting around with another man, haven't you? What is he talking about, going around with another man? I have no such recollection. I've been working diligently, taking over the household and meals in place of my idle husband. It's outrageous to be accused of fooling around. I haven't done anything to be suspected of. What's this all about? Suddenly, my husband. I saw you having lunch with a man the other day. It's nothing but cheating, isn't it? That was just lunch with my boss. He's discussing possibly making me the manager for the next project. Don't give me that excuse. I want a divorce. I won't ask for a property division, but I'm taking the $300,000 in savings in the house. You might as well become homeless. Saying that, he left the divorce papers on the table and went to the bedroom. The papers already had his signature on them, and he had even placed our wedding ring on them, as if to weigh down the decision. Oh, he's serious, accusing someone of infidelity without any proof. I supported my husband through our marriage, handled parenting alone, and continued to support him even after our son left home. If this is the outcome, I'm ready to accept it with anger and a sense of helplessness. I packed my things, took the divorce papers, and went to the law office to submit them. Afterwards, I contacted my son to head to his place. I'm sorry to bother you like this. That dad, he's really messing around. Kick mom out. Maybe he just wanted a divorce all along. But I won't stay silent about this, and there's something I'm curious about. My ex-husband had barely participated in our son's upbringing, and in this situation, my son was firmly on my side. That alone made me happy, but my son didn't seem intent on staying quiet. It's inconceivable that the divorce would end without splitting the house and savings. I wanted to regain some peace, planning to forget about my ex-husband for a while. But 1 week after I started living at my son's place, he revealed a shocking truth to me. It was about a secret my ex-husband had kept. I never imagined he would hide something like this. In that moment, I felt an anger unlike anything I'd experienced in my life. Resolved to make my ex-husband pay, a month later. Hello, finally it's connected. What do you want, Dad, after all this time not calling? Now what? Where's Mom? She's with you, right? So what if she is? You're with a young woman, so it shouldn't matter, right? My ex-husband had tried contacting me multiple times, but I completely ignored him. Then he started calling my son. My son ignored him for a while too, but after incessant calls, he snapped and answered, I know everything. That you were cheating, and you kicked Mom out because of it. What are you talking about? I didn't. I suspected something fishy even before you divorced Mom. I saw you walking hand in hand with a young woman after work. I didn't have proof then, but I've looked into it now, and a lot has come to light. What? You seem to have spent quite a bit on keeping that young woman around. Do you even have any savings left? You didn't dip into them, did you? After my son's words, my ex-husband fell silent again. Since the day I moved in with my son, he had been quietly investigating my ex-husband. Apparently, my son had spotted my ex-husband walking with a woman in a busy district about 6 months ago and had been suspicious since then. At the time, my son knew our relationship was cooling and thought it might just be an outing after a night at a bar. But given recent events, he thoroughly investigated, and my ex-husband's infidelity came to light. Apparently, he had been cheating for over 5 years. Or should I say engaging in a sugar daddy arrangement? It's disgusting spending money for fake love. Well, it's rude to comment on someone's hobbies. I can't imagine his salary alone would cover such expenses. According to my son's investigation, my ex-husband had given quite expensive gifts, spending a significant amount. Whose money was that, I wonder? Naturally, it casts suspicion on the money I had contributed to our joint savings. So what's it going to be? Have you touched the savings? Of course not. Then from the $300,000 in savings, you'll pay out $200,000 for alimony. We'll divide the property, sell the house, and send half the amount. No, that can't be. If you can't do that, we'll take it to court. I have a friend who's a lawyer and will fight this thoroughly. His reaction confirms he must have been misusing our money. How audacious to kick me out after doing whatever he pleased. But it's not just me who feels that way. My son shares my sentiment. If you don't want this to get to court, I expect you to handle this sincerely. Mom probably doesn't care what happens to you anymore. But I can't just pay $200,000. Don't make me state the obvious. Property division is standard, and you're the one who brought up divorce, right? Yes, but to think that I cooked and cleaned for such a person, and even made his favorite meals, it really is pitiful. What was the point of those 28 years? But at least I have the savings I accumulated, and he will struggle because of how much he misused. I decided to give him a piece of my mind one last time and borrowed my son's phone. You were the one who misused the funds, so take responsibility. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. I don't need your excuses, but you have your job and all that's irrelevant. Both you and that woman will suffer until you die, and I'll make sure you regret this. With that, I hung up. Afterward, he tried to contact me multiple times, but I blocked all calls and messages. I kept the email just in case we needed to communicate for any official matters. But it was a relief not to receive any more calls. Thanks for everything, and I'm sorry for the trouble. I've disliked Dad for a long time. I won't let him play around with you anymore. Thank you. I'll make sure he takes responsibility for the money, and he will see hell. My son has truly grown into a dependable person. My ex-husband had no redeeming qualities, neither as a husband nor as a father. Following this, my son and his lawyer friend helped me claim alimony, and we arranged for it to be paid in installments. I was present during the negotiations, and my son's friend spoke in a commanding tone throughout, which kept my ex-husband on edge, ensuring he wouldn't escape payment. If he tried to avoid paying, he knew he'd face stringent legal actions, and a lawsuit would only increase his expenses. I don't know the details, but in the end, his affair partner disappeared. It was indeed just about money. It's ridiculous that young women would be attracted to an older, unattractive man with a bad personality. Clearly, it was nothing but the money to think he wasted precious money and time on such things. My ex-husband was really foolish, getting deeply involved in such nonsense and ruining his life. While showing such a bad example of fatherhood might have been a good lesson for my son in the end. As for me, I continue to live with my son for now, saving all the money transferred by my ex-husband. My son has been talking about marrying his girlfriend in the future, so I can't keep imposing on him forever. I need to manage my retirement life on my own. But in the end, cutting ties with my ex-husband was truly a blessing. It also allowed me to reaffirm the bond with my son and to remove unnecessary elements from my life. At last, I hope to spend the rest of my life slowly and meaningfully with the people who are really precious to me. I'm Emily. I am 35 years old and have a thing for cleanliness. I put myself through school working for a large company. I am always told by my friends that I supposedly take things too seriously, and yes, it's true I hold on to receipts, still from food 2 years ago. Pay tax on time. Yes, who the hell does this? But they all are just stepping stones to being in control of your life when shit snowballs. So if you missed it, the story of how I met my husband, Brian. It was at a party hosted by Angie's other friend, Julie. I remember that evening well. Brian came in, with me drinking a glass of wine and catching up on my college girl news. He was older, stocky, and self-assured with a crackling smile. A manager of food sales. "Hey, I'm Brian. Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding a beer and looking directly at me. "Sure, I'm Emily." "Nice to meet you," I replied with a smile. We started talking, and I was surprised by how easy it was to chat with him. We discovered that we both loved and had a shared passion for classic rock music. A few months into our relationship, Brian invited me to his sister Lauren's barbecue. It was my first time meeting his family, and I was a bit nervous. When we arrived, Lauren greeted us warmly, but her 5 kids were a different story. They were running around, screaming, and throwing toys everywhere. "Hey, Lauren, this is Emily," Brian said, introducing me. "Nice to meet you, Emily," Lauren said, barely holding on to James, who was trying to squirm out of her grasp. "Nice to meet you all," I replied, trying to hide my discomfort. As the evening went on, the kids got wilder. They were climbing on furniture, throwing food, and yelling at the top of their lungs. I looked at Brian, hoping he would say something, but he just smiled and shrugged. "Aren't they just full of energy?" he said with a chuckle. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, they sure are." As Brian and I got closer, we started talking about our future together. He proposed to me during a hike on top of a beautiful hill overlooking the valley. It was simple and sweet, just the way I liked it. Our wedding was lovely, except for one little problem: Lauren's kids. They were running around, making a mess, and being loud. Lauren didn't seem to mind, and Brian thought it was funny. "Look at them, they're having so much fun," Brian said, laughing as he watched them spill drinks and toss food around. "Yeah, but they're also making a huge mess," I replied, trying to keep calm. "Oh, come on, Kel. They're just kids. Let them enjoy," he said, shrugging it off. I didn't want to spoil our special day by arguing, so I let it go, hoping things would get better once we settled into our new life together. After we got married, Brian and I decided to buy a house. We had been living in a rented apartment, but we wanted a place of our own. I was really excited about this new chapter in our lives. One evening after work, Brian and I sat down to talk about our finances and how we would manage the costs for our new home. "Emily, we need to figure out how we're going to split the costs," Brian said, leaning back on the couch. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," I replied. "I can handle the furniture, appliances, and some art pieces. What about you?" "Well, I was thinking I could buy you a new car." "I know your old one is giving you trouble," Brian suggested. I was surprised and happy. "Really? That would be amazing." "My car is practically falling apart." "Yeah, I've seen it struggle." "It's time you had something reliable," he said with a smile. We started house hunting right away. After a few weeks of looking, we found a beautiful house that we both loved. It was a bit expensive, but we decided it was worth it. Moving in was a busy process, but I was excited about decorating our new home. I spent a lot of time picking out furniture and appliances, making sure everything was nice and stylish. One Sunday, Brian surprised me with the new car. It was sleek, shiny, and I was thrilled. "Brian, this is incredible." "Thank you so much." I hugged him tightly. "You're welcome, Emily." "You deserve it," he said, looking proud of himself. As we settled into our new home, things seemed to be going well. We both enjoyed our jobs and loved coming home to our cozy house. But small things started to bother me. Brian's laid-back attitude, which I once found charming, was beginning to annoy me, especially when it came to household chores. "Brian, can you help me with the dishes tonight?" I asked one evening after dinner. I had a long day at work. Can't we just leave them for tomorrow?" He replied, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Brian, we can't keep putting things off." "I'm tired too, but we need to keep this place clean." I insisted. "Fine, I'll do it," he said with a heavy sigh as he got up from the couch. A few months into our marriage, I started worrying because I couldn't get pregnant. It was really stressing me out. I went to the doctor and he told me to be patient, that it would happen when the time was right. Still, it was hard not to worry about it. Meanwhile, Brian's sister Lauren, with her 5 kids, was visiting a lot. Lauren lived in a neighboring state, but you'd think she lived next door with how often she was around. Every time she came over, she'd unload all her problems with her husband on me. It was nonstop. "Emily, you won't believe what Richard did this time." Lauren would start, rolling her eyes. "Lauren, can we talk about something else for once?" I'd ask, trying to steer the conversation away from her marital drama. "Oh, come on, Emily. I need to vent." "You're the only one who understands," she'd reply, not getting the hint at all. And her kids were a nightmare. As soon as they stepped into our house, it was like a circus. They'd run around, fighting with each other, throwing food, and just being loud. "Guys, can you calm down, please?" I'd say, trying to keep my cool as they tore through the living room. "Why are you always so uptight, Kel?" Lauren would snap at me whenever I tried to get her kids to behave. "They're making a mess, Lauren." "I just cleaned the house," I'd respond, feeling my patience wearing thin. "Well, maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand," she shot back one day, her words hitting me like a punch in the gut. I was shocked by how insensitive she was, especially since she knew how hard I was trying to get pregnant. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't believe Brian didn't say anything to defend me. "Brian, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Emily, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, taking her side again. "A big deal out of nothing? She just insulted me in my own home," I shouted, feeling tears start to form. I was so fed up. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly being disrespected in my own home, with my husband always siding with his sister. It was clear that something had to change, and soon. One Sunday, Lauren showed up with her 5 kids. She dumped them on me and said, "Emily, I need a break from parenting. I'm going shopping." I couldn't help but chuckle at her mention of parenting. The woman barely knew what that meant. Every time she was here, it was like a zoo. "Fine, Lauren, but you better be quick," I said, already feeling stressed. "Thanks, Emily. You're a lifesaver," she chirped, grabbing her purse and bolting out the door before I could say anything else. Great, I thought. Just what I needed. I was in the kitchen trying to cook dinner. It's a long process, and I like things done right. But with those kids running wild, it was impossible to focus. They were yelling, running around, and making a mess. "Guys, can you keep it down?" I shouted from the kitchen, hoping they'd listen for once. Of course they didn't. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. My heart sank. I ran into the living room, and there it was, my grandfather's antique Chinese vase, shattered on the floor. My chest tightened with anger and frustration. What happened here? I screamed, looking at the kids who were now standing still, looking guilty. "We were just playing," one of them mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "This vase is priceless. It's from my grandfather. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I was livid, shaking with anger. Just then, Brian walked in, looking all calm and clueless. "What's going on, Kel?" he asked. "Your nephews just broke my grandfather's vase," I said, pointing at the shattered pieces on the floor. "Calm down, Emily. It's just a vase." "We can get it fixed," Brian said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Just a vase." "This isn't about the vase, Brian. It's about respect. I'm tired of this. Every time Lauren comes over, our house turns into a mess, and you don't care. I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. Just then, Lauren walked in with shopping bags, looking annoyed. "What's all this yelling about?" she asked. "Your kids broke my grandfather's vase," I said, pointing at the floor. "Well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them, Emily," she said, not even bothering to apologize. "Are you kidding me? They're your kids, Lauren. I shouldn't have to watch them." I was furious, my hands shaking with anger. Brian just shook his head, looking annoyed. "You're overreacting, Emily." "Just drop it," he said. "Overreacting? I've had enough of this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home, with my husband always siding with his sister." I screamed, the tears finally spilling over. Brian just stood there, silent and cold, while Lauren smirked like she had won something. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the room, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. We'd been dealing with Lauren and her kids' chaotic visits for months, but I had no idea what was coming next. One morning, Brian was sitting at the kitchen table, munching on his toast, when he casually dropped a bombshell on me. "Emily, I need to tell you something. Lauren's getting divorced, and she's moving in with us. With the kids." "For a few months," he said, like he was just telling me the weather. I almost dropped my coffee. "What? Are you serious? Our house is already a madhouse when they visit for a day. How are we supposed to handle them living here for months? She's my sister, Emily. She needs our help." "You need to be more understanding," he said, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Understanding? I've been more than understanding, Brian, but this is too much. Why can't we rent a place for her nearby? I'll even pay for the first month's rent," I suggested, trying to keep my cool. "No, she'll be better off here. Plus, you can help with the kids and keep things clean," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I'm not a babysitter, Brian. I work too, and I need to relax when I get home," I said, my frustration boiling over. "Stop being so selfish, Emily. It's family. They need us," Brian said, his tone getting sharper. "I'm not being selfish, Brian. I'm just asking for a fair solution. I don't want my life turned upside down," I said, feeling my anger rise. "Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you better get used to the idea," he said, standing up and leaving the kitchen. I couldn't believe it. I felt completely blindsided and betrayed. The next morning, I woke up early, still fuming from our argument. I got dressed for work and went to grab my car keys, but they were nowhere to be found. When I called Brian, he answered, sounding way too calm for my liking. "I took the car. It's mine, remember? I'm giving it to Lauren so she can use it for the kids," he said. I was stunned into silence for a moment. "You're giving my car to Lauren? Are you serious right now?" "It's not your car, Emily. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do," he said, sounding matter-of-fact. "That's the last straw, Brian. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Emily," he said, clearly not understanding. I stood there in the hallway, holding my phone, unable to believe what was happening. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had things gotten so bad? I picked up the phone and called a moving company. "Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent." The movers arrived a couple of hours later. I showed them around the house, pointing out the items to be moved. "Take everything, the beds, sofas, chandeliers, even the faucets in the bathroom," I instructed. The movers got to work, and soon the house started to look empty. I felt a strange sense of relief watching them carry out each piece of furniture. As the last item was loaded onto the truck, I directed them to my mom's house. Everything goes there. Thanks for the quick work, guys, I said, handing them a tip. With the house now bare, I grabbed my essentials and headed to my mom's place. A few hours later, my phone started buzzing. It was Brian, calling repeatedly. I ignored the calls, feeling a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. That evening, there was a loud knock on my mom's door. I opened it to find Brian standing there, looking furious. "What the hell, Emily? What did you do?" he shouted as he stormed into the living room. "I took my stuff, Brian. You took the car, so I took what I bought," I said, keeping my voice calm. "This is insane. You stripped the house bare. Where are Lauren and the kids supposed to sleep?" he yelled, his face red with anger. "That's your problem, Brian. You made this mess. Now you deal with it." I replied, crossing my arms. "You're a thief, Emily. You stole." "Everything," he shouted, waving his arms around. "I didn't steal anything." "Here are the receipts," I said, pulling out a folder and showing him the proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He looked through the receipts, his anger turning to frustration. "Fine, Emily. If this is how you want to play it, I'll file for divorce," he said, exasperated. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. "Already done. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them and we're done." He stared at the papers, his face pale. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" "Dead serious, Brian. I deserve better than this," I said, feeling a strange sense of calm watching over me. He took a pen from his pocket, signed the papers without another word, and handed them back to me. "Fine, Emily. Have it your way." I watched as he turned and walked out of my mom's house, the door slamming behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It was over, and I knew it was the right decision. That night, I sat down with my mom and talked about everything that had happened. She was supportive and agreed that I had made the right choice. "Emily, you've been through a lot. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness," she said, giving me a comforting hug. "Thanks, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out," I replied, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders. Over the next few days, I started to settle into a new routine. I began organizing my new space at my mom's house and planning my next steps. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. I had taken back my life, and there was no turning back. After divorcing Brian, we sold our house and split the money. It was time to set up my own place. My mom's house was great for a while, but I needed my own space. One afternoon, I was sitting in the kitchen with my mom, looking at listings on my laptop. "Mom, I think I've found a place that looks perfect. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work," I said, showing her the pictures. She looked over my shoulder and smiled. "That looks nice, Emily. Have you called the realtor yet?" "Not yet, but I'm going to do that right now," I said, feeling a bit excited. I dialed the number and waited for the realtor to pick up. After a few rings, a friendly voice answered. "Hello, this is Larry. How can I help you?" "Hi, Larry. My name is Emily. I'm interested in the apartment you have listed downtown. Is it still available?" I asked, crossing my fingers. "Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a viewing?" He replied, sounding hopeful. "Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon?" I suggested, trying to sound calm. "That works for me. I'll see you at 4:00 p.m., Larry said before we ended the call. The next day, I headed downtown to meet Larry and check out the apartment. When I arrived, he was waiting outside the building with a friendly smile on his face. "Hi, Emily. Nice to meet you. Let me show you around," he said, shaking my hand. The apartment was small but cozy, just what I needed. It had a nice kitchen, a spacious living room, and a small balcony with a decent view of the city. "This place is perfect, Larry." "I'll take it," I said, feeling a sense of relief. After signing the lease and getting the keys, I started planning my move. I wanted to make this new space my own, a fresh start. I spent the next few days packing up my things at my mom's house and arranging for movers to help me with the big stuff. On moving day, my mom and a couple of close friends came over to help. As we loaded the last box into the moving truck, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about this new chapter in my life. "Emily, this is going to be great for you. A fresh start is just what you need," my mom said, giving me a reassuring hug. "Thanks, Mom. I'm really looking forward to it," I replied, smiling. We drove to my new apartment, and with everyone's help, we had everything unloaded and set up in no time. As I looked around my new space, I felt a sense of accomplishment and excitement for what lay ahead. That evening, I invited my mom and friends to stay for dinner to celebrate the move. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and laughter. "Cheers to Emily and her new place," my friend Julie said, raising her glass. "Thanks, guys." "I really appreciate all your help and support," I said, feeling grateful. As the night went on, we talked and laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy and free. After the party, as I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights, I thought about everything I had been through and how far I had come. I was proud of myself for taking control of my life and making the changes I needed. I heard from some mutual friends that Brian used his share of the money to buy a small apartment. Now he's living there with Lauren and her 5 kids. Brian's working 2 jobs to keep up with the bills, while Lauren still isn't working. They're fighting all the time. One day, out of the blue, Brian called me. I was surprised to see his name pop up on my phone, but I decided to answer, curious about what he had to say. "Hello, Brian. What's up?" I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Emily, please just hear me out," he started, sounding desperate. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize how hard it was for you with Lauren's kids." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "Really, Brian? You're realizing this now, after all this time?" "Yeah, I know it's late, but I'm serious. I've been thinking a lot, and I miss you. I miss us. Can we start over? I'm ready to move into your apartment and make things right," he said, his voice almost pleading. I chuckled, shaking my head in disbelief. "Brian, you've got to be kidding me. You think you can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened?" "Emily, I'm serious. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll even take on more work to make it up to you," he insisted, sounding more desperate. "Brian, I've moved on. I'm happy now. I'm not looking to go back to that mess," I replied firmly. "Come on, Emily. We can make it work this time." "I've changed," he insisted. I sighed, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. "Brian, it's over. You need to focus on your life and your family. I'm not interested in going back to that chaos." "Emily, please. I'm begging you," Brian said, his voice breaking with desperation. "Brian, no. I found peace without you, and I'm not giving that up," I said, standing my ground. "Take care, Brian. I hope you find your way." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. It was clear that Brian was struggling, but I couldn't let his problems drag me back into a situation I had worked so hard to escape. Later that day, I met up with Julie for coffee and told her about the call. We sat in our favorite little cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. "You won't believe who called me today." I said, rolling my eyes as I stirred my coffee. Who? Julie asked, raising an eyebrow and leaning in with curiosity. Brian. He actually begged me to take him back and let him move into my apartment. I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Julie burst out laughing, nearly spilling her coffee. Are you serious? What did you say? I told him no, of course. I'm not going back to that mess, I replied, smiling at the absurdity of the situation. We spent the rest of the afternoon chatting and laughing, and I realized just how far I had come since my life with Brian. I had built a new life for myself, one that was peaceful and fulfilling. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The cafe was a cozy spot with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background, creating the perfect setting for our heart-to-heart conversation. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, we decided to take a walk along the river. The cool breeze was refreshing, and the sound of water flowing gently against the banks added a calming effect to our stroll. I can't believe how much has changed in just a few months, I said, looking out over the water, the lights from the buildings reflecting off the surface like tiny stars. You've come a long way, Emily. I'm really proud of you, Julie said, giving me a supportive pat on the back. You're stronger than you think, you know. Thanks, Julie. I feel like I've finally closed that chapter of my life, I said, a sense of relief washing over me as we continued to walk. I'm ready to move forward with confidence and joy. The next few days were busy but fulfilling. I started to settle into a new routine and began organizing my new space at my mom's house. It felt good to have my own place again, even if it was temporary. My mom's house was warm and welcoming, and she was incredibly supportive during this transition period. I spent a lot of time decorating my room, making it feel like my own little sanctuary. I put up some of my favorite artwork, arranged my books on the shelves, and set up a cozy reading nook by the window. It was a space where I could relax and feel at peace, away from the chaos and stress of the past. One evening, as I was unpacking the last of my boxes, my mom came into the room with 2 cups of tea. Thought you might need a break, she said, handing me a cup and sitting down on the edge of the bed. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it, I said, taking a sip of the warm tea. It was soothing, and the familiar taste brought a sense of comfort. You've been through a lot, Emily. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness, she said, giving me a comforting hug. You deserve it. I just need some time to figure things out, I replied, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders as I looked around my new space. Over the next few days, I continued to adjust to my new life. I started planning my next steps, looking into new opportunities, and setting goals for the future. It felt like a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about what lay ahead. One afternoon, I decided to go for a walk in the nearby park. The weather was perfect, with a gentle breeze and clear blue skies. As I walked along the tree-lined paths, I thought about all the changes I had made and how far I had come. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace, knowing that I was on the right path. I bumped into some old friends while walking and ended up spending the afternoon catching up with them. It was great to reconnect and share my experiences, and they were happy to see that I was doing well. We talked about old times, laughed about silly memories, and made plans to meet up more often. It was comforting to know that I had a strong support system and people who cared about me. As the sun set, I headed back to my mom's house feeling content and hopeful. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face it with courage and determination. I had taken back control of my life, and now I wasn't going to let anyone or anything disrupt my newfound peace and happiness.